Chappelle being the legendary comedian who has over recent years seen his universal love slowly turn into controversial appreciation from a distance. I've made a few videos about Dave over the years, first in response to his controversial special The Closer a few years back when he made failed attempts to defend his lazy use of trans jokes. I also engaged with Dave probably a year ago after he released the Dream.
Trans jokes are funny. I don't care what nobody say. If you don't think a dickless man is funny, you crazy.
We're mostly just explaining why my take on Dave and his weak defense of his trans jokes has aged incredibly well. However, today, after watching Dave's most recent special, The Unstoppable, I realized there are some flaws in the way I've spoken about Dave in these last few years. I was really being too nice to Dave. Dave Chappelle is one of the greatest comedians of all time, one of the few comedians from the 90s who can still tell good jokes halfway through the 2020s. This is not up for debate. I want to start there just to level set.
Okay, now hey.
The Unstoppable isn't Dave's best work, but that doesn't mean it's not funny. It suffers from being compared to Dave's early work nearly 30 years ago that still holds up to this day. I had a few good laughs, but nothing compared to any of that stuff from 30 years ago, let alone some of his other work on Netflix. I say all of this to undermine anybody new coming here.
The first 3 on Netflix was the best.
That thinks I'm here to cancel Dave or to undermine the talent that Dave has, although he will probably get some flack for his anti-Israel statements. I'll come back to that. My goal in this video isn't to get you to stop enjoying Dave's work or to imagine a world where what I have to say will change the way that people regard Dave. I'm just presenting a critique of Dave in this special to enrich your own thinking and maybe entertain you. My goal is for you to reevaluate your perception of what Dave Chappelle is and has been doing in his comedy. Even if you decide to continue to support and celebrate him, which is your prerogative, at least you'll be better informed and less easily manipulated about what's actually being happened. Because talented, rich people are not cancelable unless they do some type of heinous sex crime, and even then, it's a toss-up. So understand up front, Dave Chappelle.
And see, that's the reason I like FD Signifier. He's one of those people that I disagree with, but I probably could have a conversation with him. I probably would enjoy it. It would be an enjoyable conversation, an enjoyable debate. But half the stuff he said, I'm just so against.
Has not and will not lose a penny for anything I or anyone else has said. I'm just engaging with ideas, so please don't throw that out there as a deflection or whataboutism, all right? Don't waste your time with the he's entitled to his opinion defense, because whenever you say that, you're basically just admitting that you don't have an argument to go against what's being said, so you're arguing for the validity of saying something, which is stupid. But it is what it is. I say all this to say, feel free to click away if you don't want your perception to be challenged. And if you decide to stay and engage,
I'm always down for a perceptional challenge.
With that, don't be a fucking baby in my comments, all right? So to explain what I'm sure will be an inflammatory title for this video, let's look at this old joke from Dave Chappelle.
I'll say anything, nigga. I've done commercials for Coke and Pepsi. I don't give a fuck what comes out of my mouth. I just say what it takes. Whatever it takes, that's what I'm saying.
I want to shout out to the brothers at Waving the Red Flag podcast. We talked about this in their podcast, maybe like the night after it came out. But this joke from like 20 years ago is honestly the most telling and clarifying joke about Dave that he's ever given the world.
So you think he's just saying whatever he want to say, like whatever they want him to say?
Dave Chappelle is full of shit. He's a bullshitter. And the thing,
I mean, he's a comedian. I mean, that's kind of written into the lexicon, into the name. It's comedy. It's kidding.
That I need to fully engage with is that Dave knows he's a bullshitter, but he also knows that most of us don't know he's a bullshitter. To be fair to him, he's tried to tell us numerous times, right? But despite that, people still hold him up as a truth teller, as the opposite of being full of shit, when in reality, his main focus has always been bullshitting to get his money. Dave, as he says in his special, is a capitalist, and as any highly talented comedian, bullshitting is their job. So
right, exactly.
I kind of get it. But what I want to do here is make sure that from here on, if you've watched this video, that you get it too, so you can stop treating Dave with a reverence he does not deserve. I've already talked at length.
Because he's being facetious and bullshitting doesn't mean he doesn't deserve reverence for his job, and doesn't mean that there isn't any truth in what he's saying. The interesting part about someone being a quote unquote bullshitter or playing both sides of the fence is that no matter who you are, you can somewhat agree with them and also somewhat disagree with them, you know, because he's taking both sides. And his most important job is to make you laugh. So anything outside of that, to me, is not a worthy critique. I think it's an unfair criticism.
About the trans jokes and how they're lazy and poorly thought out, along with being offensive. So I'm not going to rehash that. But again,
I don't know. Them first bunch of trans jokes was hilarious, son. Hilarious. Trans lady throwing a dick on the table to negotiate. Come on, man. That's hilarious.
I tended to think that maybe like most people, Dave just didn't know how off he was with the trans jokes. So his offensive jokes could be interpreted as mistakes of understanding. However, now it's very clear and more egregious that Dave knows he's doing things that he deserves criticism for. He just doesn't care, but he does care enough to not like being criticized. Dave is not unaware of how harmful what he's saying and doing is. And
he just don't care. He got to crack jokes somehow. You can't walk around trying to not offend anybody. You know, then how do you express what you think is funny? If something tickles your funny bone, pause.
His previous behavior and ideological positions are to be taken seriously. He shouldn't know what he knows that he acts like he doesn't know. Does that make sense? To clarify, around
You're saying if you knew better, you should do better.
Halfway through this special, Dave talks about how he's been criticized for going to the Riyadh Festival in Saudi Arabia, and he has this to say.
I've been getting a lot of grief, again, because I did a comedy festival in Saudi Arabia. They said, well, Saudi Arabia killed a journalist, and rest in peace, Jamal Khashoggi. I'm sorry that he got murdered in such a heinous... Also, Israel's killed 240 journalists in the last 3 months. So I didn't know y'all was still counting.
So this is a classic whataboutism, and I know for a fact that I need to explain it, so sit tight for a second.
Nah, you don't need to explain. We know what whataboutism is, and I do not like it either. But once again, do telling jokes.
The Riyadh Comedy Festival was a special event held in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, and it was a controversial and in many ways disappointing example as to why you should believe Dave's words in that snippet I showed earlier, because it shows that Dave, much like most celebrities, is only as principled as he is well paid. Many of you may not know this, but Saudi Arabia is not a great place for a multitude of reasons. They've participated in more than a few human atrocities over the years. They have extremely repressive laws around women and sexuality that are legitimately more oppressive than other Muslim nations and not actually rooted in a true practice of Islam. Their government is corrupt and despotic. Dave mentions how they murdered a journalist a few years back for
Khashoggi. They said he chopped him up. That's kind of messed up.
Criticizing the royal family. Yes, but that's not where this begins or ends. And again, Dave knows this. Saudi Arabia also has what essentially amounts to legal slavery right now in 2020.
That's true. And that's true for a few Arab nations. And people forget that people that are Muslim, not taking anything away from anyone's faith. But if you're a Black American and supposedly against slavery, it's interesting that you do understand that much of the transatlantic slave trade could not have taken place without the Arab nations. They were the people that crossed the desert, that introduced a lot of European nations to the concept of sub-Saharan Africans, aka Black people. Here we go.
2026, probably when you're watching this, they have an estimated...
Not calling us a concept, but you know what I'm saying. And not calling Black people, all Black people are us. Here we go. I can't get into this. Y'all gonna go into Tether Talk. I already know.
700,000 plus people in a variety of exploitative conditions, which amount to slavery, many of which are Africans. Speaking of Africa, the Saudi government has treated them...
I still don't agree with you, FD Signify. I just want you to know. Yeah, I mean, like I said, I like the dude, but a lot of stuff, I'm like,
much like America has treated its imperial neo-colonies, which includes an influx of Ethiopians who often immigrate to Saudi Arabia because of the things Saudi Arabia is doing in East Africa. And those Ethiopians were subject to a mass killing just a couple of years ago. Saudi Arabia is also currently funding one half of the Sudanese civil war that's creating a massive humanitarian crisis in Africa. I've had a few people point out that Saudi Arabia is not explicitly funding the more brutal Rapid Support or RSF forces, which is true, but they're still greatly responsible for the neo-colonial state of Sudan, and they are engaged in what amounts to a proxy war with them and the United Arab Emirates, who are allegedly funding the RSF. And this is all with the goal of controlling the resources of Sudan, not supporting the self-determination of Sudan or anything that's actually helpful to Africans. I am glossing over a lot. Global politics is not my bag. Feel free to elaborate or correct me in the comments. I'm working on something to fix my lack of understanding there. But here's the point. Dave pointing out how awful America is with its support of Israel or legacy of empire does not make it the same, does not make it any less bad that he went there to perform. This wasn't like Dave had a homie with the comedy club in Saudi Arabia and he went there for a private event.
No, he went to get that
performed
money
for those in power to whitewash what they're really doing in that country and abroad.
Coupled with the fact that he is Muslim, therefore he's chosen sides.
And much like with every other person that is forced to perform there, I guarantee Dave had to sign a contract to censor himself to not criticize the Saudi government or say anything bad about what they're doing. Which is something, if you let Dave tell you, he would never do, because freedom of speech and his ability to say what he wants is so important to him. But it's not if the check is right. It's a
Yeah, I mean, I did notice that when he talked about how it was easier to speak in Saudi Arabia than it was in America. I'm like, speak about the king. Say something funny about the king if you want. Say something, crack an Allah joke. See how free you feel up there.
Complete betrayal of what many perceive Dave to stand for. It's the definition of selling out. Performing at this festival at the behest of the Saudi government for their king and their prince or whatever would be like somebody from Saudi Arabia coming here to perform for Donald Trump, and Donald Trump made him promise not to talk about racism or issues with queer people or ICE terrorizing the cities and all kinds of shit. The same stuff.
No, I'll up you one. It'll be like someone, like a comedian from Saudi Arabia going to Israel and performing for them and taking the money and and saying, oh man, it feels really good over here.
He's complaining about what Donald Trump, if he were a Saudi Arabian person coming here, they'll be like, I don't see anything wrong happening in DC. That's who Dave Chappelle is right now. And I need people to recognize that. And Dave is literally joking about his role in that process and how well they paid him to tap dance for those people.
Every article said the comedians hoard themselves out to a dictator, but all the articles have my picture on it. And you know what? I can't even get mad because you know, to be fair, I did make more money than all of those comedians. You know what my new job is? I sit by the phone and wait for them Arabs to call me. Can I help you guys?
When Dave does the whataboutism comparing them to the US or Israel, it's some bullshit and he knows it. But he knows most of y'all don't know this. He knows he can tell a few jokes, bring up something that everyone would be on his side about, which is the genocide in Gaza, points at a shitbird nobody likes like Bill Maher, and then moves on as if he's really addressed the issue, but he hasn't. There really is no excuse for Dave performing over there except for him just saying, look, I wanted the money and I'm greedy. And he's kind of said that, just not fully. What's clear now, going back to the closer where Dave famously promised he wouldn't make any more trans jokes. Remember that? Remember when Dave Chappelle said, no more trans jokes until we're all on one accord? This nigga. It shows that Dave doesn't have a lot of respect for his audience because he knows at the end of the day, enough people will either be misinformed or not care about him talking out his ass without consequence.
Coupled with the fact that people have short memories today in the, current age of news cycle being damn near less than 24 hours. I mean, I'm a person that covers the news and everything. Sometimes the story will get old, from the morning to the evening or completely change and the scope of it changed. We have so much access to so many things. So I think a comedian like Dave on his class and his level understands this. And what I said before is what I said before. What you going to do? Research it? People don't research.
When Dave says it's easier to talk in Saudi Arabia, he really means it's easier for him. And that's only because he has no desire to criticize the fact that the people that cut that check are also murdering African immigrants and funding a genocide in Sudan. And I bet he doesn't like that. In fact, I'd argue that he probably doesn't even agree with the treatment of gay people in Saudi Arabia, but
I don't give a fuck what comes out of my mouth. I just say what it takes. Whatever it takes, that's what I'm saying.
And I wouldn't be so.
And then you can't say that's true either, because you got to also remember he walked away from that bread at a time where he didn't have this kind of bread, where he didn't have opportunities to go to Saudi Arabia for one night for however millions of dollars he went for.
Bothered if it weren't for the mythological role that Dave plays in Black culture as some type of righteous truth teller. I don't think Dave lies per se, right? But as I said in my video, he only tells half truths. He says the part people will appreciate and leaves out the parts where he's taking blood money or doing things he knows he shouldn't be doing to offend folks because he knows he can get away with it. And that's what really frustrates me about certain black folks right now beyond Dave Chappelle. We are severely lacking in our capacity to idolize a situation beyond a racial frame. I understandably feel the need.
That is true. Everything comes down to race with us. But I mean, could you blame a group of people for not having a larger world view when so much of our lives are contained right here in America? America is almost like a self-contained planet. And we get the information that's allowed to us. So, I mean, how could the masses go on anything other than what they're fed? You know what I mean?
To protect, uplift, and celebrate our icons and luminaries who make great art and comedy and music, much like all of us are rooting for Anthony Joshua to knock out Jake Paul or whichever Paul brother that is, and that fight.
I think people of all races wanted that to happen.
That I'm still with. But if Anthony Joshua comes out and does some fuck shit about black people, then it's fuck Anthony Joshua until he apologizes for the shit. We really got to be recognizing when we're being played, when folks are using their connection to blackness to avoid substantive criticism, because it happens all the time, and so many of us keep letting these Negroes get away with it. If people talked about Dave Chappelle the way they do Kevin Hart, who also performed at the festival, because of course he did, I wouldn't even bother talking about it because nobody's running around saying Kevin Hart is some type of radical truth teller. In fact, I probably wouldn't even say anything about Dave if he hadn't put out this half-assed horrible whataboutism of an excuse. If he just did a special and not even addressed it, I'd have maybe made a post, but like, I wouldn't think to break it down even further because at least that's an acknowledgement that he knows he was wrong and doesn't want to engage in it. But because Dave is
I don't know if he knows he was wrong. I think he was addressing criticism.
on this pedestal, I feel the need to make sure people understand why they need to knock him off. For the longest, Dave has done little to nothing to agitate against power or the systems that harm us, and even in his comedy. We got a few Charlie Kirk jokes, but they were pulled punches if you ask me. And if you think about it, we haven't heard hardly anything in terms of our political reality from Dave for almost 10 years of Trump and Biden and Trump again. He talks about it at the end of this video, but consider.
I think he doesn't want to be wrong. Just like when he tried to jump off with Trump in the beginning and said we should give him a chance, and it turned around and bit him in the ass. I think after that, he's been a little bit tenderfoot around some American political issues.
Where he really stands, I just can't follow him there. I just wish folks would expect and demand more from people we proclaim to be powerful thinkers. The bar is too low right now, and Dave himself is proof. I get it. I was there when the story broke that Dave left the Chappelle show and went to get his mind right in Africa, leaving $30 million on the table and sacrificing his
He said it was 50.
show, allegedly off the principle of holding on to his integrity as a black man. That was an amazing and inspiring moment to witness, and I still find that story inspiring, but that was 20 years ago. Barack Obama was about to be president, Kanye West was still dating black women, and cell phones chirped. The preceding years have not been kind to Dave's principles. It's hard to believe that the same man who fled to Africa just came back from Saudi Arabia. But here we are. It's still perfectly fine to find Dave's comedy enjoyable. I laughed several times, although not as much as other specials. Dave is not responsible for the system he participates in. We all have to make compromises at different times because that's the reality of the situation. But there's compromising and then there's transgressing. And I don't know about y'all, but to me, performing for a government that's committing a genocide in Africa is a transgression. I don't know, maybe I'm weird for that shit. But I don't know Dave. Dave is only accountable to his community and his own conscience and his family. But I know that my conscience and my community will probably look elsewhere for real truth-telling and righteous behavior.
All right, shout out to FD Signified, man. I really respect your work, even though I argue at the screen every time I watch it. Shout out to him.